Imagine you're holding a receipt. Not for something you bought. For something you already owned. A receipt that says, payment received. But the payment isn't cash. It's permission. Permission to sell your own cloth. Permission to harvest your own salt. Permission to move your own goods across your own roads. And every permission comes with a fee. Now zoom out, this isn't one receipt. It's an entire economy turned into paperwork. And the paperwork is designed so the money only travels one way. That is how one of history's richest regions can be legalized into poverty. Around 1700, economic historian Angus Maddison's estimates place India at roughly about a quarter of global output, often cited in the 24 to 27% range. By the mid-20th century, around the end of British rule, the commonly cited Madison-style comparison drops India to roughly 3–4%. Those aren't just statistics. They're the outline of a crime scene. Because when a share that large collapses, one question matters. Where did the difference go? And no, this story is not, they fought wars and took treasure. Not mainly. The more powerful weapon was administration. The empire's masterpiece wasn't a cannon. It was a system. A system that could extract wealth without always looking. In the early modern world, India wasn't merely participating in trade. It was magnetic. European merchants didn't sail east because India needed them. They sailed because India sold things the world couldn't replicate easily, especially textiles, dyes, and high-skill manufactured goods. And when you consistently export high-value goods, something predictable happens. Bullion flows toward you. Gold and silver don't move because of flags. They move because of demand. So in the 1600s and early 1700s, India isn't poor but populous. It's a manufacturing civilization with enormous productive depth. Which makes the next twist even darker. Britain didn't begin by ruling India. It began by doing something far more modern. It built a corporation that could behave like a state. The East India Company was a business, but with a charter that let it wage war, sign treaties, and eventually govern. A private entity with state privileges. At first, profit came from commerce. But commerce has limits, competition, bargaining, risk. Taxation is different. Taxation is a tap. If you control revenue, land revenue, customs, monopolies. You don't need to win every trade deal. You just need to make sure the ledger closes in your favor. A turning point comes in 1757, after the Battle of Plassey, a moment that many historians treat as a pivot in company power in Bengal. But here's what matters more than the battle itself. The accounting power that follows. Because after political dominance comes the right that changes everything. The right to collect. To understand the machine, forget the Romantic Empire imagery for a second. Think in categories. A. Revenue systems, turning peasants into predictable cash flow. Land taxes and collection frameworks weren't just governance. They were financial engineering. If the state's priority becomes remitting reliable revenue, farmers get pushed toward what sells, often cash crops, even when food security weakens. B. Monopolies, profit by forbidding alternatives. When you control what can be produced, who can sell it, and at what price. You don't merely participate in the economy. You define it. C. Trade design, making exports serve someone else's industry. This is the heart of the story. India had long exported high-value finished goods. Under British dominance, the pattern increasingly flips toward exporting raw or semi-raw materials. Importing finished industrial goods. That's not a natural evolution. That's a rewiring. And one of the clearest rewirings wasn't textiles alone. It was opium. Britain had a problem in Asia. It wanted Chinese goods, especially tea. But it didn't want to pay for them in silver forever. So what do you do when the market won't give you a favorable balance? You redesign the circuit. A major circuit became: produce opium in India. Sell opium into China. Use the proceeds to finance Britain's Asian trade. This matters because it shows the imperial economy as a payment system. India becomes a platform that helps balance Britain's external accounts. So even when the ships aren't literally carrying India's treasure, India's production is being used to settle Britain's bills. This is where empire becomes less like conquest, more like financial plumbing. Indian thinkers didn't need modern economics to see what was happening. They watched money leave and not return. One of the most famous critics was Dadabhai Naoroji, who argued that colonial rule created a systematic outflow, what became known as the drain theory, and wrote about it in Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. His point was brutally simple. If surplus is extracted and not reinvested locally, development doesn't compound. It withers. And the empire had elegant channels for outflow that didn't look like looting. The most respectable channel had a polite name: home charges. Home charges were payments India made to Britain for things like salaries and pensions of British officials, interest on debt raised in London, costs linked to administration and military structure. On paper, this looks normal: states pay for services. But in a colonial structure, the arrangement becomes circular. India is charged for running the system that subordinates India. And the money leaves as financial transfers rather than goods. So the outflow can grow without anyone calling it plunder, because it's recorded as expenses. This is what makes it so modern. Empire doesn't have to steal a check. You will sometimes see a massive figure cited. Economist Utsa Patnaik argues Britain drained the equivalent of about $45 trillion, in today's terms, from India over the long colonial period, using a method based on export surplus and compounding. It's a staggering claim, and it's also debated. Critics argue the methodology and assumptions, especially compounding choices, can dramatically alter the final number. But here's what doesn't depend on one single headline figure. The structure of extraction was real, persistent, and institutionalized. And its consequences show up in deemed as. Here's the part that should haunt anyone who thinks markets are automatically humane. In a system designed to maximize revenue stability and export performance, human survival can become a rounding error. India suffered catastrophic famines in the late 19th century, even as exports continued. And debates around relief often prioritized market discipline over immediate human life. That's not a bad year. That's a worldview. If the spreadsheet balances, the policy is justified. And once that worldview is installed, it outlives flags. Because the tool isn't the empire. The tool is the model. When independence arrives, it doesn't arrive with rebuilt industry, deep capital reserves, high literacy, food security guaranteed. It arrives after a long era of outflows and structure. So yes, India's economic fall, measured in global share, is one of the sharpest in modern history. And no, there isn't a single lever you can point to and say, that alone did it. It was a portfolio. Revenue systems that turned society into cash flow. Trade patterns redesigned to feed foreign industry. Financial transfers disguised as administrative necessity. And a moral logic where profitability could outrank survival. This isn't just history.